Eppur si muove, Galileo. Power has always carried with it the stench of blood. Whether whispered through marble corridors or shouted across battlefields, the story remains unchanged. Someone must pay the price. But it is not always the hand that strikes the blow that pays. More often, it is the fool who is seen to strike, while the true hand remains hidden, white, clean, and untouchable. History is not filled with innocence. It is filled with those who learned how to appear innocent. This is the first, most sacred truth behind law. 26. The appearance of virtue is more powerful than virtue itself. The true masters of power are not those who avoid sin, but those who disguise it, those who orchestrate cruelty from behind curtains, direct betrayals through proxies, and when the dust settles, step forward to offer clean hands and a gentle smile. There is no triumph in being honest about your wrongdoings, no reward for standing at the front of the fire. The world is not fair in its judgment. It punishes the visible, and power does not reward the bloody. It rewards the pristine. Imagine a ruler, cold, calculating but adored. Their enemies vanish. Their critics fall silent. Scandals erupt, but never touch their name. The public sees only grace, diplomacy, civility. Behind them, though, are shadows, advisors, ministers, scapegoats. Each one a tool, a barrier, a lightning rod for blame. These are the silent offerings on the altar of power. This is not new. It is as ancient as empire. In the Old Testament, the high priests of Israel performed a sacred rite, the scapegoat ritual. One goat was sacrificed to God. The other, symbolically burdened with the sins of the people, was driven into the wilderness. One bore blood, the other blame. But the priest remained untouched. He did not kneel. He did not bleed. He cleansed. That same ritual lives on, in boardrooms, in courts, in campaigns, in dynasties. The names change, the robes change, but the altar stands, and those who forget this principle often become the goat. It is not enough to avoid wrongdoing. That is a child's hope. In the adult world of strategy, perception is reality. What matters is not whether you are guilty, but whether you are seen to be guilty. You may make 10 correct decisions, but if one misstep attaches your name to scandal, incompetence, or cruelty, your entire house can fall. This is why the wise delegate their dirt. They let others speak the lies. Others sign the orders. Others take the fall. And when judgment comes, they are already seen walking away, head high, garments clean, untouchable. Even gods did this. In Roman Judea, when Pontius Pilate faced the execution of Christ, he saw the danger. He did not shout for blood. He did not raise a sword. Instead, he performed a symbolic gesture, washing his hands before the people. He claimed innocence, claimed he had no choice. The crowd roared. The sentence was passed, but history remembers him not as a butcher, but as a man who stood by. That is the genius of symbolic distance. Pilate knew what all rulers must know. Optics outweigh action. You can be the cause of a disaster and still be praised if you remain unseen. This law does not require that you be cruel, only that if cruelty must occur, you must not be attached to it. In fact, those who follow this law often appear the opposite of ruthless. They are charming, gracious, forgiving, and that, precisely, is why they are so effective. While their enemies are thrown to the lions, they are seen offering wine to the masses. It is a kind of moral theater, and if performed well, it becomes indistinguishable from truth. but it comes at a price. To truly keep your hands clean, you must be willing to stain the hands of others. A loyal subordinate, a temporary friend, a fall guy. You must learn how to select them, how to elevate them just enough to be visible, but not enough to be protected. Then when the fire comes, you step back, and they burn. The crowd sees only one thing. You are still standing. This is the altar. It is not a place of worship, but of sacrifice. And make no mistake, sacrifice will be made. The only question is whether it will be you or someone you chose. The world demands blood, but the game of power demands that it be someone else's. This is not dishonor. This is survival. The naive may see it as betrayal. The wise see it as insulation. The greatest rulers in history, from emperors to CEOs, did not rise by fighting fair. They rose by understanding this sacred strategy. The masses do not care who caused the fire. They only care who appears to be holding the match. And so, the game begins. You stand at the edge of the altar. There are 3 chambers before you. Each one contains a lesson, a historical offering, a sacrifice that had to be made for power to endure. You will learn how Florence abandoned its puppet, how the church protected its throne, and how a ghost in Napoleon's court killed without consequence. Each chamber will deepen your understanding. Each story will sharpen your tools. And by the end, you will not only understand this law, you will know how to use it. The fire crackles behind you now. The light fades to a single flame. You step into the first chamber, where a republic needs a hero, and chooses a victim instead. Florence, 1502, the republic after the storm, and a man destined to be forgotten, not for his sins, but for the sins others placed upon him. The year was 1502, and Florence, once the jewel of the Renaissance, was adrift. The bonfires of Girolamo Savonarola had only recently died down, leaving a city scorched by religious extremism and desperate for stability. Power had been torn from the Medici, then seized by zealots, and now it passed again. This time into quieter, calmer hands. Enter Piero Soderini, a man of polite manners, loyal Republican values, and moderate intelligence. He was not a firebrand, not a warrior, not a revolutionary. He was a bureaucrat, a respected one, chosen to hold the crumbling republic together while more ambitious men waited in the wings. But Piero Soderini was never meant to lead. He was meant to hold the line. The Florentine elite understood this. They didn't need a strong man. They needed a face, a clean face, free of scandal or ambition. A man who could be elevated to the role of gonfaloniere for life, not because he would wield true power, but because he would absorb blame. Florence, like all unstable regimes, required a focal point. Someone to represent the failing state so that others behind the scenes could remain insulated. That was Soderini's true function, not to govern, but to be governed through. Not to rule, but to be sacrificed when the tide turned. Soderini accepted the title. He wore the robes. He spoke the speeches. And to his credit, he tried. He reformed the courts, balanced the budget, and opened diplomatic channels with France, a powerful but risky ally in the Italian wars. But he lacked the instincts of a survivor. He believed too deeply in good governance, too little in political cruelty. He did not understand that in a republic fractured by war and internal betrayal, competence alone was not enough. He needed enemies to fear him. He needed allies who would fight for him. He had neither, and worse. He had Machiavelli watching him closely. At the time, Niccolò Machiavelli served as Florence's second chancellor, a cunning, brilliant observer of human behavior and political decay. He admired aspects of Soderini's republicanism, but even he could see what was coming. Florence was weakening. The war with Pisa dragged on. The Medici family, exiled for nearly a decade, plotted their return. The French, once protectors, had grown distracted, and Soderini, he was left exposed. He had not committed any unforgivable crime, but that's not what matters in power. What matters is visibility. He was the visible head of a failing state. He was the one the people could blame, and so the decision was made, quietly, behind doors, without fanfare. Soderini would be the offering. In 1512, the Medici returned to Florence with Spanish backing. No war was declared. No great rebellion ignited. They simply marched in, claimed authority, and banished Soderini without a fight. There was no last stand, no speech from the balcony. He fled, quietly, respectfully. Like the moderate he was, the Medici did not need to dirty their hands with execution. They allowed Soderini to live out his days in shame and exile. He faded from history, a man who had once held the title for life. And the true power brokers of Florence emerged untouched, as if they had simply stepped into the void, clean and unsullied. Piero Soderini is not remembered for crimes. He is remembered for being seen. This is the genius and cruelty of Law 26. When a regime needs to cleanse itself, it selects someone visible, soft, and ideologically safe to blame. Someone who has tried to do things right. Someone who can be publicly discarded without chaos. Soderini had no army, no bloodlust, no genius for fear. He was easy to cut away, like trimming a dying leaf to preserve the tree. And what makes this example so potent is that his fall was not about truth, but about narrative. The Medici could return because Soderini had been painted as weak. That was enough. Power is not interested in justice. Power is interested in perception. If you wish to survive in politics, business, or power structures of any kind, you must understand the role of the scapegoat and learn to never become one. To avoid this fate, never be the most visible in a failing system. Visibility attracts blame. Do not assume your good intentions protect you. They often mark you as expendable. Keep power decentralized. If every decision flows through you, then so will every failure. Create buffers. Let others share responsibility publicly, and take the fall if needed. And if you are already the scapegoat, then make noise. Make enemies. Become dangerous. Because the more harmless you appear, the more likely you are to be fed to the wolves when the time comes. Now you step deeper into the altar. The stone is cold beneath your feet. The flame flickers above your head. You've seen how the innocent can be sacrificed. But what of the guilty who are abandoned? What happens when a man speaks too boldly, and those who once praised him leave him to burn? The year is 1633. The church rules with divine authority, and a man named Galileo Galilei prepares to face judgment, not for lies, but for truth. And when the sentence falls, no one lifts a finger. The year was 1633. Rome stood as the center of the Catholic world, a city of soaring cathedrals, whispering priests, and iron authority. But beneath its sanctified marble echoed a growing terror, the terror of the New World, a world where science threatened scripture, where stars defied the heavens, and where men dared to suggest that the earth was not the center of all things. It was a fragile time, and into it stepped a man who would become both martyr and lesson. Galileo Galilei. Galileo was not merely a scientist. He was an oracle of motion, a revealer of patterns, a challenger of old gods. His observations of the sky, Jupiter's moons, the phases of Venus, the elliptical orbits, all led him to a single, devastating conclusion. The Earth was not the center of the universe, and if the Earth was not central, neither was man. And if man was not central, what of God's order? It was not simply astronomy, it was heresy, and yet for a time, he was protected. Galileo was close with the Medici. He had patrons in high places, princes, cardinals, even the Pope himself, Urban VIII. He was allowed to publish. He was praised for his brilliance. In fact, in 1620, he received personal assurance from the Church. He would be allowed to explore heliocentrism as a hypothesis, so long as he did not assert it as absolute truth. Galileo believed this was enough. But he had misread the altar. He assumed his genius protected him. He assumed favor meant safety. What he failed to see was that in times of ideological fear, truth is a liability, and those who tell it too loudly become threats to be silenced, not directly, but through ritualized abandonment. In 1632, Galileo published Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems. It was a brilliant, dramatic, almost theatrical work, presenting three characters debating geocentrism and heliocentrism. But one of those characters, Simplicio, represented the traditional church view and appeared foolish. Urban VIII, once his protector, took personal offense. The line had been crossed, and the protectors vanished. The following year, Galileo was summoned to Rome. There would be no defense council, no public protest, no army of allies. All those who had once praised him went quiet. Even the Medici, once eager to place their name on his discoveries, made no effort to defend him. Galileo was tried by the Inquisition. He was found vehemently suspect of heresy. He was forced to recant, humiliated, silenced. His works were banned. He spent the rest of his life under house arrest, and not a single one of his patrons lifted a finger. Galileo's story is not just a tragedy of censorship. It is a case study in strategic abandonment. He was not sentenced by those who hated him. He was sentenced by those who once claimed to admire him. And when the heat rose, they chose the church over the man, because their own power depended on clean distance. To defend Galileo would have meant stepping into the fire with him. And power does not burn for loyalty. It burns for self-preservation. This is the hidden blade, the betrayal that leaves no fingerprints, where your allies step backward without a word, and your fall becomes necessary theater for their survival. Galileo teaches us that even the brilliant fall when they forget the nature of protection. To avoid his fate, never confuse favor with safety. A protector is not a savior. They are an asset, and they will cut you off when you become a liability. Understand your value in context. When your presence causes friction with higher power, you will be abandoned, even by those who once needed you. Always maintain leverage. Do not give all your discoveries, loyalty, or voice to a single institution. Once they have what they want, you become expendable. watch for silence. If your allies are no longer defending you loudly, assume they are preparing for your funeral. And above all, do not overestimate your righteousness. The truth may be on your side, but power only cares if the truth is useful. The air is colder now, the altar darker. You've seen the sacrifice of the scapegoat. You've seen the blade concealed by silence. But now we enter the final chamber, where power becomes pure theater, and where a man orchestrates terror, betrayal, and survival, without ever raising his voice. His name is Joseph Fouché. And when Napoleon's empire crumbled, it was not the general who stood unscathed. It was the ghost beside him. He never shouted. He never smiled. He rarely wore a uniform and never rode a horse into battle. And yet, from the French Revolution to Napoleon's empire, and even beyond the restoration of the Bourbons, one man managed to stay in power while kings lost their heads and generals lost their crowns. His name was Joseph Fouché, a name that has since faded from the common tongue, but one that once made emperors flinch. He was a chameleon, a shadow, a survivor, but more than anything, he was a master of Law 26, because Fouché did not just keep his hands clean. He designed the system that made it possible. Born in 1759 in Nantes, France, Fouché was not bred for command. He studied theology in his early years, but theology was soon replaced by revolution. When the French Revolution erupted, he aligned himself with the radical Jacobins, the very architects of the Reign of Terror. He voted for the execution of King Louis XIII, helped purge dissenters, and supported the guillotine. But unlike others, Danton, Robespierre, and the rest, Fouché never allowed the spotlight to rest on him for long. He understood something they did not. Revolution rewards action. Power rewards invisibility. When Robespierre rose too high, Fouché turned on him. He aligned with the moderates. He orchestrated purges from behind the scenes. And when Robespierre was sent to the guillotine, Fouché did not gloat. He did not speak. He simply stepped forward and claimed the position of Minister of Police, the most powerful, most feared office in post-revolutionary France. From this vantage point, Fouché built something astonishing, a silent empire. He created the world's first modern surveillance state. Spies in every tavern, eyes in every theater, whispers catalogued, loyalties tested, secrets archived. By the time Napoleon took power, Fouché already knew everything about everyone, including the general himself. And that's why Napoleon kept him close. But even the emperor would come to fear him. Fouché was not loyal. He was useful. He could predict uprisings before they began. He could squash dissent before it took form. He could eliminate enemies before they knew they had crossed the line. But if things turned sour, Fouché would already have an escape route planned. When Napoleon marched across Europe, Fouché remained in Paris, untouched by war. When Napoleon crowned himself emperor, Fouché bowed. When Napoleon invaded Spain and bled his armies dry, Fouché whispered doubts to his allies. And when Napoleon returned from the disastrous Russian campaign in 1812, Fouché began contacting the enemy. He never confronted Napoleon. He never made accusations. He simply prepared for the next phase of power. And when Napoleon was finally exiled in 1814, Joseph Fouché, the man who had once voted to kill kings, welcomed back the monarchy and was named minister again by the restored Bourbons. He had betrayed everyone, and yet everyone still needed him. That is the magic of Law 26 taken to its highest form. Fouché is not an example of morality. He is an example of mastery. He survived 3 regimes: the Revolution, the Empire, the Restoration, and in each one, he served at the center, quietly, effectively, and without blame. While others gave speeches, he gave orders. While others fell to history, he edited history. He never denied his involvement in purges. He never admitted it either. He let the facts remain clouded. A strategy more powerful than denial. Fouché teaches us that to survive the brutal churn of power, you must do more than delegate blame. You must disappear from it entirely. You must create false fronts, those who act as decision-makers while you remain hidden. Layers of loyalty, so no one can prove your command. Channels of deniability, so blame never finds you. A fog of usefulness, so no regime can afford to remove you. Even in disgrace, Fouché always had something to offer, and that is why no one ever dared destroy him completely. This is the highest level of power, not to crush your enemies with force, but to remain untouched while they destroy one another. If you wish to become like Fouché, never be the face of policy. Be the architect behind it. Do not chase titles, chase leverage. Make yourself irreplaceable, not lovable. Build silence around you like armor. And when the flames rise, walk calmly through the smoke. Fouché teaches us that the most dangerous man in the room is not the one with the sword. It is the one who whispers instructions, then leaves through the side door before the fighting begins. What you've just witnessed are not exceptions. They are not cautionary tales wrapped in historical costume. They are the blueprint. Power is not built by purity. It is built by perception. And the most dangerous mistake you can make is believing that your good intentions, your honesty, or your talent will shield you when the fire comes. Let us be clear. Piero Soderini was not a fool. Galileo was not a criminal. And Joseph Fouché, he was not a hero. But all 3 played roles in the theater of power. Only one survived. What separates the sacrificed from the survivors is not truth. It's not justice, it's optics, it's the narrative, it's who stands behind the curtain and who's lit by the stage. Power doesn't care who's right, it only cares who is seen holding the knife. And so, if you want to rise in any domain, business, politics, even family, you must begin to think in layers. Ask yourself, if this decision goes wrong, who will take the fall? How can I appear above conflict while quietly directing it? What rituals can I create to distance myself from consequence? Do I speak too loudly? Do I stand too alone? Who benefits from my failure, and how are they positioning me? These are not paranoid questions. They are the beginning of strategy. The scapegoat shows us that power needs a target. The hidden blade shows us that alliances are temporary, and the wash basin reveals the highest form of dominance, where you can end kings, shift empires, and still walk free. That is real power, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that orchestrates and erases itself. And the danger of this law is not just in ignoring it. The danger is in forgetting that others already use it, often on you. So if you've ever been blamed for someone else's mistake, lost your job while the true problem remained, been made an example in public while others slithered away, then understand. You are placed on the altar, and unless you learn how to build your own rituals of distance, someone else will do it again. Let others take the credit and the blame. Let others scream. You watch, you listen, you choose when to speak. Clean hands are a performance. Rehearse it well. And when the time comes to strike, strike through others. Do not swing the sword yourself. Let the blood flow without ever touching your robe. Because power is not just in action, it is in absolution. And the most powerful figure is the one who ordered the execution and was never in the room. Like, subscribe, comment, or don't. You are the master of your own life.